Okay, welcome back to a warm and very windy Saturday afternoon here in Flagstaff, Arizona. The plan for today is quite simple. If you look over here on the instrument cluster of my new CRF300, you'll see that we have just hit 500 total miles on the clock. Now, even though the service manual says that you don't need to do the first service on this bike until you hit 600 miles, I figured 500 is a nice round number. Oil is cheap, and I've got the time today to actually go in and do the first maintenance. So I've got the owner's manual right here. Interestingly, the only thing listed for the first service is the oil. Nothing else, not even inspecting bolts or anything is listed on here. So what I'm going to do today is, yes, I'm going to change the oil, but I'm also going to check the coolant, I'm going to check the chain slack, I'm going to check the air filter, I'm going to check the tires, I'm going to check nuts and bolts, kind of everything you should do on a brand new bike after you've been riding it for a couple of months, just to make sure everything is perfect. So before we get started, let's make sure we have what we need. I've laid out a little pile here on the floor, as you can see. Kind of all the things that you would expect. I've got my oil, my new gold plug, a new filter and gasket. I've got my measuring vessel as well as my funnel and a bunch of rags. I've got the actual service manual. I've got some spare coolant, a bunch of tools and torque wrenches, and bicycle pump and some Loctite, etc. So all the sort of basic things that you would expect for an oil change and basic first maintenance. Now, there are a couple of caveats that I want to clear the air with before we actually start on the oil change. First things first, if you look in the owner's manual at the end, it recommends the Honda GN4 oil. Now, I know that there's arguments to be made for synthetics, but for the sake of the owner's manual and for what I want to do with my bike, I'm going to go ahead and use what's recommended in both the owner's manual and the service manual. The second thing that I'll note, just for the record, is for a standard oil change, including filter, the owner's manual recommends 1.45 liters or 1.53 quarts of oil. And lastly, and this is kind of a weird thing, at least here in the States, despite the model of this motorcycle being called the 300LS, the actual specific model number, according to the owner's manual, is the Honda CRF300 LDA. So any place in the owner's manual where you see a reference to LDA, like with the chain slack, that is the LS. So just keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and do the oil. First thing I'll say is I did just ride the bike to warm up the engine, so the oil is nice and warm. I'm a little nervous to see how things go here with this skid plate, but it looks like there's a pre-drilled opening for the drain plug, and it looks like the drain plug takes a 12mm socket. Well, that broke nice and easy. There it goes. So it did make a kind of a mess of my ratchet, only because, I couldn't really reach up and get the drain plug. So something I've done, in addition to removing the actual filler cap to let some air in the system, is I've kind of shimmied a rag under between the skid plate, and I've just been sort of kind of moving it around in there to help absorb some of that oil that pooled on the inside of the skid plate. So we're going to just let that soak up for a while before we move on. Now, while that's continuing to drain, I'm just going to inspect the filler cap and make sure the O-ring looks good, and it does. Then up here, I'm just going to clean out as best I can. Get some of that dust and dirt. One of the tricks that I learned from the Himalayan is that you can use aluminum foil as a sort of handmade funnel here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wedge this piece up underneath where the filter is, so that when I slide my drain pan here, if any oil comes out of here, it'll just drain down that aluminum foil. All right, so it's time to remove the oil filter. Now, I do have a brand new filter right here. There's the part number in case you're interested. And I also have a brand new gasket. So I'm going to go ahead and move this using an 8mm socket. See, we already got a little bit of oil coming out. You can see how well that little aluminum foil trap is working. Look at that, beautiful, right? This bottom one here does get a little bit in the way of the brake lever, but it's not too big of a deal. Now there is a spring in here that we're going to make sure we don't lose. All right, I'm just gonna go ahead and set that there. And you can see there's the spring right there. A very important note is that when you go ahead and put this filter back in, you have to put the gasket side inward. Now you can see my gasket just came off, and the gasket looks perfectly fine to reuse, but I ordered a new one, so I'm just gonna go ahead and replace it because it was like $5 and I figure it's worth it. All right, so everything is looking great, nice and clean. Look at how beautiful and clean that looks. We've got our parts all cleaned up here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the new filter ready, get it put on, and then button everything up. Getting a little oil on the filter. So I've got the gasket on here. I'm just gonna feed a couple of the bolts in to sort of prep it and get it ready. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put the filter on. And then I'm very carefully going to set this in place, get a couple of these bolts started. Now while that's just kind of sitting there, I'm going to take the other 2 bolts that I've got here and put the tiniest of dabs of blue Loctite. I always just like to have a teeny little bit of blue Loctite on these guys. Obviously with any system like this, you want to do a star pattern. Before you shut this down, you just want to make sure that it's actually doing what it should be doing. If you come around, you can see there's definitely some pushback from that, which means we are in good shape. Now I did check the service manual and there was no torque spec listed for these. My general comfort zone has always just been sort of hand tight. I mean, it's just one of those things that comes with practice, I think. Tighter than I can do them with my little T-wrench here. So, filter is good. Now obviously before we can put new oil in it, we need to put the drain plug back in. So I'm just gonna go under here and I'm gonna do one final cleaning. We've got our new gold plug here. I'm just gonna put a tiny little bit of thread seal on it. I'm gonna get it started. One thing I have noticed is that because of the skid plate, I've had to use the longer sockets. So go ahead and put that in there. And we're gonna tighten her down. That's it, 24. That's not very much at all. All right, so again, just as a reminder, the service manual does say for a full oil change with filter, we wanna put in 1.45 liters. And then it says in order to fill it properly, to fill it between these 2 lines, close to the upper line really is what you want. And then turn it on, let it idle for 3 to 5 minutes. Then turn it off and wait 2 to 3 minutes and then top it back off again. So this is just like the Himalayan. We basically fill it to where it's supposed to go, let it run, let some oil kind of circulate through the system, shut it off, let the oil settle, and then whatever we still need to fill, just top it off with a few, maybe 50 more milliliters. Okay, we've got our first liter here measured out. We're just gonna go ahead and start filling it in. All right, so we've got the first liter in, and as you can see, there's nothing showing up yet in the sight glass. So we're gonna pour out the next 450 milliliters here. I'm just trying to get it to that upper line before we go ahead and start it up. So it looks like it still needs a little bit more. We are at the upper line now, as you can see, right there. Okay, it ran for a couple of minutes. We're gonna come back around here. We're gonna keep an eye on that sight glass. We're gonna give it maybe a minute or 2 to sort of refill. Now the bike is perfectly level right now. I've got it on a rear stand. So you certainly don't wanna have it on the side stand when you're doing this. Okay, one final check. That is looking pretty good. All right, I'm just gonna clean up the brakes a little bit. Make sure to hydrate. All right, so the next thing that I wanna check according to the owner's manual is the drivetrain slack. So we wanna check the chain, see if it's loose. It shouldn't be because it's brand new and it looks to be okay, but we're gonna check it anyway. According to the specification section in the back of the book, the drivetrain slack for the CRF300LDA, which is again the LS, should be between 45 and 50 millimeters. The standard L is 50 to 55, so this is 5 less amount of slack. So it's a little bit tighter than the standard. Now it also lists this right there on the chain guard in case you don't have your owner's manual with you. But here's the thing, checking the slack, you might think you just check it from down below, but it actually tells you to check it up here in this space of the chain guard. In fact, there's actually a slot right here in the top so you can drop down a small ruler. Now I don't have a small ruler, I just have my tape measure. So I'm just gonna use that for now and kind of set it here. And it is 4.6, so what is that, 46 millimeters. So we're perfect, right between 45 and 50. So that's exactly where it should be. As expected, it's a brand new bike, it's only got 500 miles on it. I would hope that I wouldn't have to adjust the chain this early. So chain's looking good, let's move on. Flipping through my owner's manual here, there is actually a really nice section on standard maintenance, and it goes through kind of the whole gamut of things. One of the things it says is to check your spark arrestor. Again, we don't need to do that this early. We did the engine oil, so we're good there. We did the chain slack, so that's good. The next thing it says is to check the coolant level, and that it should be between the lower and upper mark, ideally closer to the upper mark. So we're gonna look around here at our reservoir, and if you look, there's our lower mark, there's our upper mark, and there's our level. So I could probably put a little in there if I wanted to. In fact, I might do that. I might just top it off a little bit. Now, obviously, I'm going to use the Honda certified 50-50 blend, so all I have to do is pour a little bit of this in and we're good to go. We don't have to do any mixing or anything. Definitely use what Honda recommends. All right, so that brought it up closer to about 85%. I think I'm good with that. Okay, so what's next? Well, next is the tires. So I want to check the tire pressure first, and then I'm going to check to make sure I don't have any loose spokes. So according to the owner's manual and over on the chain guard, tire pressure for front and rear on the LDA or the LS version of the 300 should be 22 in the front and 22 in the rear for up to 200 pounds. And that's what it says right here. Now I weigh about 155. You put my bag on the back, you put my backpack on the back of my back, and you know, you're probably creeping up towards like 175, 180. So I'm probably fine to go 22 front and rear, especially given how much dirt I ride. But if the back is, you know, 24, it's probably okay. It does say that you're supposed to set the rear at 25 for maximum weight capacity. So we're gonna go ahead and aim for 22 in the front and 23-ish in the back, 22, 23 in the back. So let's go ahead and check it. All right, looks like we're at about 21. So I'm gonna just put a little bit of air in it. Let's check it again. 22, beautiful. The rear is at about 24, so I'm just gonna leave it because it's already a smidge high. So our tires are right where they should be. Let's go around back and make sure the wheel looks to be true. It looks okay, but I'm still gonna go through and I'm just gonna check to make sure I don't have any loose spokes. Now remember, spokes are kind of weird because they rotate in the wrong direction. In other words, instead of righty-tighty, it's actually lefty-tighty because the screw is actually in the rim, so you're actually screwing them from the underside, if that makes sense. So all I'm doing is just making sure that there's no slack. I'm not actually really tightening them. Same up front, we're just gonna go around, make sure everything feels snug. Ooh, that one's actually pretty loose. Huh, I did have one that was quite loose. Okay, excellent. So where does that leave us in our maintenance book? Well, we've checked the oil, we've checked the coolant, we've checked the tires. We've checked the chain. We have not checked the brakes. It does say to check the brake pads for wear, but I'm gonna go ahead and skip that since we're only at 500 miles. And it says to check the side stand, which again, also is fine. Checking the clutch, it's the last thing I wanna do. I'm gonna come around here. I did slightly adjust the free play in the clutch, and that's about how much I like right there. I might tighten that up just a teeny bit. Okay, I did bring this in just like one full rotation, and now my Slack is just a little bit tighter, a little bit less. Now there should be a little bit of wobble in the throttle, which is good, which is what we have, because when you turn the handlebars, it actually tightens things up, and so you don't want to have it too tight. And so this is about right where I like it. Everything looks good there. I'm gonna check, make sure that that's clear right there. Everything seems to be good. So the last thing I'm gonna do before I call it a day is I'm just gonna walk around the bike and check for any sort of loose nuts and bolts. But that's it as far as the owner's manual goes. Now I should note that one thing that I did skip that you may have noticed is I didn't lube the chain, and that's only because I just did that 2 days ago, so I don't need to lube it again. But normally I would lube the chain at this point as well. Okay, well, everything appears to be working as it should. No weird noises or leaks or indicator lights on the instrument panel. So I think we have a successful first service. Now, it is important to mention again that I have never done a service on this bike before, so I was learning right alongside with you. And other than a few YouTube videos and flipping through the service manual, this is the first time that I've ever changed the oil on the bike. And yeah, so thank you for allowing me to learn alongside you, and I really do hope that this was helpful. And with that, I'm gonna go home and watch some college football and put my feet up and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. So take care, everyone, be safe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.